You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGackie, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
Hey there, folks. What is going on? Welcome to the show today. I have to say, this is probably the most gear-focused episode I've done in a very long time, and a huge shout out to my dude, Luke, for coming on and nerding out about Les Pauls with me. It was really, really fun. Just some quick housekeeping before we dive right in. If you've been eyeing some gear, if there is something that you've been meaning to purchase, if you could remember to use the affiliate links that are associated with this show, tonemob.com/Sweetwater for anything that you're buying from Sweetwater, or tonemob.com/reverb for any of your reverb purchasing needs. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but if you do use those links, it does give me a small percentage of that sale. Again, it doesn't cost you anything, but it does help me out quite a bit. Especially Sweetwater. They are a massive supporter of the show, and they are very, very, very kind with the amount that they share from those purchases. So if something has caught your eye over on Sweetwater, please remember tonemob.com/Sweetwater. And that goes a long ways to helping keep the lights on and the roof over my family's heads. So thank you very much for everyone that does that. All right, let's dive in. Without further ado, let's get into it with my dude, Luke, from the band, The Dirty Nil. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Luke Bentham from The Dirty Nil. What's going on, dude?
Not much, man. Just enjoying the first rays of spring up here in cold Canada.
It's been cold here too in Oregon. Like, we just had snow, and that was kind of weird. I wasn't prepared for that since I had half my roof stripped off when that happened. So
I
that
had
was
the
cool.
same thing happen.
Really?
Yeah.
'Tis the season. Did it go okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's sitting in a pile out in the backyard, and there's some buckets in my house, but
Oh no.
we've had a patch job, but it hasn't really been a perfect seal to the elements, but
Right.
It's better than having nothing up there. So
I totally get it. Yeah, we got really lucky, and the guy put some of the underlayment down, and I just kept crawling up in the attic with a flashlight. Like, are we leaking?
yeah,
Nope, we were good. So
like
hopefully we get through this.
like a guy on a U-boat.
Pretty much is what it felt like. He was like, well, let me know if it starts leaking, but put a bucket under it if it does. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is just what I wanted.
Yeah.
This is perfect. Not his fault, though. I did not check the weather either. So
It happens. I don't know. It's a good reminder of I don't know what it's a reminder of, but it's a reminder of something.
it's a reminder to check your weather if you're going to take your roof off.
Yeah,
I guess
maybe?
so.
Yeah.
For anyone listening. Well, man, I've been excited to do this. I can't remember how many people on Instagram have tagged you and been like, you got to get on the podcast, got to get Luke on the podcast. And I was like, I do have to get Luke on the podcast. And now we've finally made it happen. So
Hell yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you to everyone who's requested it. I'm hoping we can get into the topics that you're interested in.
Who knows what that might be? I think it probably centers around Les Pauls, though. Most likely.
Possibly.
You seem like you're a big fan, as am I. But maybe we can dive back into the journey for the listeners who maybe aren't familiar with you, and we can. I know you've done interviews and people have talked to you about your story, but this is a very just guitar centric show, and so a lot of the times the bands and people I have on not all my listeners are familiar with. So maybe we could get your backstory and then we can talk about Les Paul Customs.
Sure. Well, so I guess, so I play in a band called the Dirty Nil, and we started in 2006 when we were 16 years old. So we've been going for a long time now. Let's see. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 12. My godfather actually gave me my first guitar. I kind of wanted to get a bass and as a way of maybe transitioning into playing guitar, and gave me a Squier Strat pack to kind of intro me into the whole thing. And that was basically it for me. I've been hopelessly committed to the thing since. I'm still trying to get a decent sound out of it. But yeah, I started playing when I was 12. Band started when I was 16, and we've put out 3 studio albums and a compilation album of our early 7-inches. And we've toured the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia pretty aggressively, and no end in sight to that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what other Cole's notes to mention of our career so far. We've played with some sick bands, too many to mention, but The Who, Against Me, Foo Fighters. We played with a lot of sick bands, but yeah, in terms of my journey with electric guitar, it started when I was 12, and as I said, it started with that Squier Strat, and I really had zero natural aptitude towards the instrument, other than just determination. I think for the first 6 months, I played with my thumb, and played like Mission Impossible, like dun, 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 on
yeah. Oh man,
that was what I started with. And
yes.
There was this Squier Strat pack came with a little amp that had a distortion button, and I pretty much, as soon as I got it, I never took it off distortion, and it was the most terrible distortion. But it's funny, the older I get, the more I like horrible distortion. So I actually kind of really like the sound of that super cheap amp. But yeah, as I said, started on that, and then I guess it was like the next year, I went up and I'd showed him that I was like practicing, and he was like, "That's really cool." And then he lent me a really, really nice Les Paul Standard. And so I remember showing up at school with that, and everyone was immediately green with jealousy. And I was the worst guitar player out of all the guitar players, but I had the sickest guitar by a country mile. And so there was the knives came out. But I think about 6 months into having that in my possession, I broke the headstock off, which
oh no,
which was the first, but certainly not the last time I've done that on a Les Paul. But he made me a deal. He said, "Listen, if you pay for the repair, you can have it." So I actually have it right behind me there. But yeah, that pretty much began my love affair with Les Pauls. I always really wanted one, because I think I had my best friend growing up, his dad had a Les Paul Studio, like a really nice Alpine white one, and there was a lot of oohing and awing around it. With all of us just had Squier Strat packs that we got for Christmas one year, so it was quite posh, the Les Paul. And when I got one, it was just it's just a dream come true. And it did make me better at guitar, having a sicker guitar, because I played on it every single day, all the time, and it was less of a challenge to push the strings down, stayed in tune better. It just sounded better, so I wanted to play it more. But I was indoctrinated into the cult of the Les Paul from a young age, and there's no amount of unbrainwashing that's going to make me leave it. So yeah, I think people that I really liked early on that played them, like it was pretty much just Pete Townsend, and it was just 70s videos of Pete. The Who were my favorite band when I was a kid, and I had a DVD copy of The Kids Are All Right, and all the footage of the Who playing in the 70s. Pete's just jumping around with a Les Paul, and I think that was just instantly what I wanted to do with my life, and so I'm fortunate enough that is my life. But that's my opening statement on my kind of indoctrination into not only guitar but the Les Paul world.
Yeah, it's something about it. I always gravitated towards them too, and I just always wanted a Les Paul, and I just remember it was kind of weird because my dad he's more of a country guy, and he plays mostly acoustic, but he's always like, oh, I really like Les Pauls. I hope I can get a Les Paul one day, which was kind of strange looking back. You're like, are you sure you don't want a Telecaster? Like, I thought you would want a Telecaster, which he has a Telecaster now, but he always had a thing for Gibson for some reason. I don't really know where that came from, honestly, because most of his favorite artists didn't play Gibsons. He just always had a thing for Gibson, and so therefore I always had a thing for Gibson. So if my dad likes it, it must be the coolest thing, right?
Yeah.
And I graduated in 2005. Well, I was also 16, so we're really close to the same age. And I asked for my first electric guitar for graduation. They're like, "What do you want?" I was like, "I really want an electric guitar." Like, I've been playing. My parents didn't, and my dad included, didn't like really understand anything about gear. They loved music and they both played instruments, but I was like, I want to play loud, distorted rock music, and they didn't have any idea how to help me get there. And so they were like, just play this. You need to get an acoustic electric because then you can do both, right? And then obviously I was like, oh, I can? Is that? I don't really. And I'd plug it into a high gain, something like a Line 6 Spider, and it's just squealing all over the place. It's not making any sense at all. I'm like, I don't think this is the way. I think I need a regular electric guitar. Yeah. So I asked for one for graduation, and I was expecting, I said, I kind of like these Schecters, and some of these lower, lower to mid-range Ibanez's and a few things, and that's more what I was expecting. And imagine my surprise when I open up, they bring out a guitar case, and I'm like, oh, I'm freaking out, because it literally, it could have been anything, and I would have been over the moon. Yeah. And I open it up, and it's like, Gibson Les Paul? It was one of the like early 2000s, like a 2003 faded Les Paul special in red, and I still have it. It's a fantastic guitar. Like it's taken a beating. It's always played good. It's always sounded good. My friends come over sometimes and they're like, "Oh, you still have that thing with all these other guitars?" I'm like, "Play it." And they play it and like, "Wow, this is a fantastic guitar." So I got really, really lucky, and my mom found it in the back of a Guitar Center for really cheap, and Dad picked it up, played it, was like, I think this is a really good guitar. So that was it for me. I was going to be a Les Paul fanboy from then on out.
Yeah, that's it's same for me. I mean, as I said, my friend's dad, he had one, and I think there's some kind of generational indoctrination into the whole thing, I think, when it comes to Gibson guitars. And it's funny because I really do think that they're awesome guitars. I think in terms of playability and price, there are certainly better guitars and all that stuff, but I'm completely uninterested. I don't care. I've picked up, somebody's put a Paul Reed Smith in my hands. And I'm like, this is an objectively amazing guitar, but I'll never play it ever, because when I think of that, I think of like Theory of a Dead Man or whatever. I don't know, Stain. But when I think of, when Les Pauls make me think of all the music that makes me happy, and just pretty much any kind of Gibson guitar. So, it's funny because like, to me, it's the most natural feeling guitar. It's just like whatever I want to do with the pickups or the switch and everything, it's just there. I don't have to think, and I just kind of can adjust with my mind turned off. But for other people, they're like, this is really heavy and like it's kind of awkward, and I'm just, it doesn't feel that way to me. I think it's because I started playing a Les Paul when I was like 4 feet tall, so I've just kind of like grown up with it. It's pretty much the only guitar that I really feel comfortable with. Everything else feels a little bit awkward, especially Stratocasters or anything, like even guitars that are technically more ergonomic feel strange to me, and I find myself accidentally hitting the knobs and turning them down and hitting switches that I'm not intending to. And so I think a lot of it's to do with just the layout of the thing. And that's just it's the one system that I'm able to kind of confidently navigate. And I'm not really interested in relearning how to do that. But yeah, it's funny. So I had that Les Paul. And then when we started the band, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to use this Les Paul. I want to use a unique guitar that's going to be like unique to me. I think every guitar player has that stage where they're like trying to be like, they're going to be defined by their gear in some like, unique way. Some people are able to do that and like, run with it and make a career from it. But, I just kind of kept playing these guitars, these like Dan Electros or whatever, and like using pedals to try and make it sound more like a Les Paul. And one day I was just like, what am I doing? And so I just kind of picked up my Les Paul again, and that was it. I mean, I've had long love affairs with different types of guitars. I played a Rickenbacker for a long time in kind of the early years of our band, and I still have it. It's a great guitar, but I just kept coming back to my Les Paul, and then I one day, just as I said, I was pulled in by the propaganda of rock photography, and one day I just really wanted to have a custom, and so I was working at this job, and I was actually cleaning out limousines. It was like in between tours. Horrible job. You can imagine what it was like cleaning out limousines after people have been in them. But anyways. One day I was really hungover at the job, and I smashed up an Escalade limousine. I crashed it, and they said, "Okay, you owe us like $3,000." And I was like, "No, I don't. That's illegal. You're not allowed to." I told my boss, if I work at the Hubble telescope and I break the Hubble telescope, I don't owe the people there $1 billion. Like that's, you can fire me, but like, of course you should fire me. I'm terrible at this job, but I don't owe you that money. That's not how employment law works. I'm an idiot. And even I know that. But so anyways, I quit.
You should have known that too.
Yeah, you should know that because it's illegal that you're even asking me to do that. But I said, listen, you guys owe me $400. So you can keep that, put that towards the old repair. I'm sure don't you have insurance? Like, shouldn't you have insurance with such big toys lying around here? Anyways, I let them keep that, and I took all the money they made from that, and I bought myself my first Les Paul custom, my black one, which is also behind me. But yeah, that was the first custom that I had, and I was kind of really I was like, I'm not going to bring it out on the road and all this stuff. And then like, I think like the second tour that we did after I got it, I was like, if I'm not going to bring it out now, what am I doing with it? Just having it sit at home, like collect dust. Like this is what I do as a job. This is, why not bring out my favorite one? So, yeah, I instantly noticed a fair deal of difference between a custom and a standard, and the differences I liked. I mean, I really liked the ebony fretboard a lot. And I really liked, it just felt like just a more substantial instrument, and they're obviously beautiful. So I got the black one, and then like, I guess it was like 3 years later, we were on tour, and I was like, I had always wanted like a really faded Alpine white one. And this is like, somehow this is like before they became a good $1 trillion, but they had one at the Chicago Music Exchange, and I just drained my bank account and bought this 1975 one. And it's actually, I'll turn my camera here, but it's right there.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, the standard's right behind it. But about a week after getting it, we were playing some festival in Quebec, and I had it on some stand, and the stand just fell over. And Fat Mike from NoFX was there, and he tried to dive and save it, and he missed. But anyways, that was the first time I broke the headstock on that one. But that's the one I've done the most touring with. So it's definitely taken a pounding, but it's my favorite sounding one and my favorite playing one. It's got a really, really solid, just straight neck that barely ever goes out of tune. So I really love that guitar. And I've changed pretty much everything on it. Has broken at some point. I've had to replace, like, it's been refretted. There's been multiple nuts on it, multiple bridges. Like the first bridge just bent. It completely collapsed. Had to swap out the pots because they were just rusted as hell from how much I sweat. And when I got it, there was some crazy Seymour Duncan Invader pickup in it that I was like, this is kind of cool, but then like it just didn't work with my rig, so I've just put a super distortion in it. And it's been pretty much like that since I got it. I've had to kind of, as I said, change things on it as it breaks, but I use it for hours every day, so things break on it. But the whole thing it's very, very solid. I think it's had 3 headstock breaks now.
Wow.
One in a flight, one from it dropping, and another one when it was being shipped. So 2 of them weren't really my fault, but the first one was definitely my fault. That if there's any young listeners out there or anybody that's like has a Les Paul for the first time or anything, and you're clumsy like me, just be prepared for your Les Paul headstock to snap at some point. And it's okay that it does. It doesn't matter. Don't get fixated on it. It hasn't affected the sound in any way that I can discern. And it's kind of a rite of passage, I would say, for a Les Paul. I'm definitely very hard on my guitars, though I try and take good care of them. I'm always meticulously setting them up and adjusting them, but fair warning, that's the only piece of advice I would give out there on that subject. But I could talk forever about how much I love Les Pauls.
I am just sitting here going like, it's a good thing that I recognized very early on that for me, I was not tough enough to go on tour. And so I was, the listeners have heard this many times, but I hate road trips. I'm kind of weird like that. A lot of people love them, and I can only imagine like touring being the almost, except for the time that you're on stage, like one of the least comfortable road trips of all time. You know what I mean? You're sleeping in vans and stuff. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that, but I love music and I want to figure out a way to be involved with music for a living. So my Les Pauls, knock on wood, have not broken any headstocks.
Oh, congrats.
They stay at home. And that said, my special, I was very hard on. Like I was jumping off stacks, playing local shows and little things, and even at practice I was thrashing around way more than was necessary. And there was definitely moments where I was like, that's it. I've broken the headstock now, and I did look and I was like, nope.
Still good. And I'm a lot nicer to my custom because I got it when I was much older. And then my grandpa's Les Paul Jr. I baby. So, it's baby's probably the wrong term. I definitely have played it aggressively, but I'm much more careful with that one because it's got a special place in the heart. So yeah,
it's I'm looking at it right now. Like, oh, hi there.
Is it a 50s one?
Yeah, it's a 50. It's a 55.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Nice.
pretty much all original with I have all the original stuff for it. I've changed the tuning pegs and the bridge so that it's got a little bit better. I got a Mojo Axe bridge on it.
Nice.
that was who suggested that to me. Tom from MXPX suggested that to me because Brian from Bad Religion suggested it to him. So I was like, well, if Brian Baker says so, then that's good enough for me. So I swapped it on, and yeah, it definitely has better intonation. So
yeah,
it's good. It's good. I love that guitar. It's phenomenal. I currently have it set up tuned to D. I'm doing the Mike Ness trick with it, and then I capo the second fret for standard because I don't know, it just changes that scale length and it just sounds different and cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the juniors too. I think I have other than like a Supreme or whatever, like I have 2 customs, a standard, a special, and 2 juniors.
Nice.
So I think I have pretty much I wasn't trying to complete the line, but or I'm not really much of a collector, but I somehow have a pile of Les Pauls now. I didn't intend to, but all of a sudden here we are. I really love, I love the special and I love the junior a lot. I got a 57 TV junior. I love that guitar. And I mean, they're super sick, and I think it probably rings the best out of any of the Les Pauls that I have. But I will say that at the end of the day, I think I just love humbuckers. I do really love the sound of humbuckers. I think that there's a lot of charms of P90s. But I love the stability of humbuckers, and I also just love the tone of them. I love the that fat sound, and also how loud you can get them before they start really rebelling against you. But it's funny. I've used a lot of vintage super distortions in my main custom. Are you broadcasting video? Can you guys see if I pull it?
Well, we'll have to describe it because I eventually want to broadcast the video, but I have not had the time to edit them yet. So
no sweat. Well, I'll use my powers of description, meager as they are.
All right, let's do it.
But I put so I used to use these old super distortions in the bridge. I barely ever use the neck. I just kind of use it as like a clean channel with like the volume rolled off. And I actually just tried out the Super Distortion 2, which I guess is supposed to be a neck pickup, but that's what I've been using in the bridge. And I think it sounds amazing for a Les Paul. And they're a bit brighter than a Super Distortion and a lower output. Like a Super Distortion is like 13K, 13 point something K. And the Super 2 is like 8K. So it's considerably brighter. It still has a ceramic magnet, so it still will give you a supercharged sound. But I find that it just has a bit more chime to it and a bit more clarity. It's designed to kind of be as clear as possible. So I really like that pickup. That's, I think, a highly underrated bridge pickup because they weren't designed to be used as a bridge pickup. But I'm just a big fan of using things in ways they weren't designed to be used. As I said, like I kind of through some of the formative years of our band, I tried a lot of gear that looked really cool, but didn't necessarily score big points in the reliability category or the tuning stability category. But as I said, I just came back to the Les Paul because, if you set them up halfway decently, they stay in tune and they sound awesome. And the pickups are stable. So it's just one less thing to worry about. But the amp world and the pedal world is another area that I have done a ton of experimenting with. As I said, in the formative years before, I was just like, I found an amp and I was just like, okay, this is going to be the amp that I'm going to use until I die, basically. It's the Marshall Super Lead, 100-watt plexi. That's it. That's the only amp I'm ever going to use. In the early years, as I said, I used a lot of wacky stuff. So, up in Canada, we have Trainer amps. I don't know if you guys know those down in Portland there, but Trainer amps are really excellent, especially the ones from the 60s and early 70s. They're like, they're hand wired. They can compete with a Marshall for sure in terms of gain and especially reliability. They're built like tanks. So I had this amp called a Trainer Bassmaster, and it's, I guess, about 50 watts. And it's got like a presence knob, but it's also got like a bass presence knob. They're interesting amps. And I used one of those for a while, and then I was just like, 50 watts is sick, but I want more. So I had a terrible Ampeg V4, like one of these Ampeg V4s that was like towards the end of when they were making them, when they had a distortion knob, and it sounded horrible, and it was terribly unreliable. I had to put so much work into it, constantly sounded bad. It was loud as hell. Definitely answered that. It was like 120 watts, but it never sounded good, at least with the pedals that I was using. And it always shocked me when I tried to adjust it mid-set. So that was an issue.
That's a problem.
You don't want that to happen. No. And then I had a decent little orange head for a while. And, basically one day I walked into Long and McQuaid, which is our version of Guitar Center. And they had a used Marshall Super Lead, and I plugged into it, and I was just like, this amp sounds amazing. And I bought it, and that was it. And I never turned back. So I got it home, and also, in the early years, I used a ton of different weird fuzzes. I never really got into delay or reverb or anything else. It was just distortion for me. So, I have a bunch of vintage stuff like Univox Super Fuzz and old Big Muffs. And but the one that I really liked forever was the Rat. The Rat's kind of been my thing for a long time. And I remember I wanted to be more like the MC5. Again, back to the photos, like being indoctrinated into rock and roll through photos, or seeing all the pictures of them with the curly cords back to their amps, and nothing on no cords to the ground, just cords straight to the amp. I was at my parents' house, and they were gone. And I set up my big Marshall Plexi rig in the living room. And I said to myself, well, what if I plug straight into the amp, but then I use the effects loop and put the rat side, multiple rats, through there. And I tried it, and it sounded awesome. I mean, I took out the Marshall handbook, and it was just like, we recommend you don't use distortions in here. These are for delays or whatever. And I was just threw that rule book out, and I tried it, and it sounded awesome. And unless I'm incorrect, I believe the way that it's actually functioning when you do that is you're putting the distortion between the preamp and the power amp. So it's just a very different flavor than putting it straight into the front of the amp. And so I found that I could kind of get the best of both worlds. I really liked the sound of it, but I also, as I said, dug how I wasn't going to pull my cable out, jumping around, or pull it out of my pedal board or anything like that. So I could kind of have them both isolated. And as I said, it kicked ass. So I basically have just been running the exact same rig for 9 years now. I haven't changed it at all.
Really?
The only things that I've changed is I've swapped out rats when they broke, or I was lucky enough to get a deal with Rat, so Proco. So whenever they came out with some cool new rat, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it out, but can I get 2 of them? Because that's how I use them. I have one on all the time, and then I have a second one kind of set higher that I use for choruses and solos or whatever it is, for a boost. And then I have a tuner. And I used to use, I have a late 70s Memory Man that looks like it's out of Mad Max. It's so rusty and crazy looking. But the only reason I was going to use it was to kind of make noise while I was switching guitars or to end the set, whatever it was going to be. But the problem with that thing is that it sounded different every time you used it. You could never, they're really cool, but you know, they're not as controllable. I just wanted to kind of sustain some sound. So someone's like, you should get the Electro Harmonix Freeze because they're like $100 and it does exactly what you're describing and it isn't going to let you down and doesn't have to have a separate crazy power supply. So that's it. So I've just used 2 Rats, a tuner, and a Freeze for, as I said, 8 years. The older I've gotten, the more I've just kind of been really, really attracted to reliability, especially with flying a lot and using European power supplies and all that stuff. Like you just want stuff that isn't going to fry when you plug it in, which has happened to me too many times to count. And it is the most frustrating feeling in the world when you're right about to play, you're plugging all your stuff in, and then you just see all the lights go off and you're like, I've done it again. So luckily now, I've removed pretty much all of the liability aspects of my rig, other than myself, who is the biggest liability.
Right.
I've pretty much had the same rig for 8 years. And, you know, it's funny because sometimes I'll get the feeling like, oh man, I would love to add this one other flavor of distortion onto my board. And I'm just like, I kind of plug it in, start messing with it. I'm like, no, I don't need this. Like, I'll do it when we actually record the song, but nobody's going to notice. It doesn't matter. It's not worth all the extra headache that I'm going to have to go through to try and incorporate this into my simple little rig. So, I've tried to kind of just keep it as simple as possible. And, I get a lot of sounds, or enough for me sounds out of that. Anyways, that's my rig.
Yeah. While you were saying that, like I was imagining if I was to attempt to go on tour with just like my solo project, it would be a nightmare. It really would be a nightmare because, you know, like every song has a completely different pedal setup and the song's entirely dependent on that particular rig because I'm playing the pedals as much as I'm playing the guitar. Mm-hmm. And, you know, 2 almost always stereo amps. And like, so I'd probably have to have like 5 different pedal boards that I could like switch between. And man, I can just see, I talked to Tristan from, are you familiar with Author and Punisher?
No.
Okay. He does like what he calls like industrial doom. Cool. And so until recently he was totally by himself, and he's a mechanical engineer by trade. And so he literally has made all these like sliding triggers and machines that he plays live, and like, it's crazy. But I was looking at his rig and just talking, you know, I've talked to so many guitarists at this point, and I asked him, I was like, so I imagine you've had like some catastrophes hit. He's like, oh, you have no idea. Like he's like, I've got it pretty reliable now, but like, you know, he has like full on audio interfaces that he's playing into. And he's like, sometimes the input will go down in his PreSonus rig or whatever. And it's just like, it totally just kills everything.
Yeah.
It's such a complicated setup that he has, but that's also what makes it unique. Yeah. So, you know, you got to take the good with the bad. So I totally understand, like, keep it as simple as possible for what you need to do. And it's obviously working for you.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't let me down too many times, which is great. You know, I've had with these vintage fuzzes and stuff, you know, we'd be playing a show, you know, in our hometown, like 10 years ago or whatever. And like, I go to step it on for a big part and like the battery would fall out and just be like, okay, guys, let's sit here for 10 minutes. And, does anybody have a butter knife so I can take the old caked screws out of this thing? And like, why am I doing this? This is just for my own vanity that I'm using this old vintage fuzz. Like I could buy a $30 copy of it and no one could tell the sound is different. But it's just for my own thing that I'm using a vintage example, even though I'm stressed out the whole time while I'm using it, barely enjoying it. The other thing the dumbest thing, I think there's a lot of in my rock and roll journey this far, the dumbest thing that I think I ever belief that I held, or at least position, I should say, was that I just thought it was uncool to use tuners on stage. And so I didn't have a stage tuner until I was about 25 years old.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And then you got one and you were like, what have I been doing?
Yeah, I think there was a couple shows where us and our bass player at the time, Dave, didn't have them because we're like, oh, it's much cooler that we don't have them. And, one of us would have recently changed their strings and tried to backstage, try and get as in tune as possible. But like when you're playing live, you're flailing away way harder than when you're practicing, and you're hitting harder because you're got all the adrenaline, and something would go out of tune and we'd have no recourse to correct it. And it would just be like, okay, so let's sound like for the rest of the 40 minutes that we're being paid to be up here. Sure. Because of our vanity, for not wanting stage tuners. So yeah, I got a tuner and I should have gotten one before. It's funny. My guitar teacher, shout out to him, Mike Treblecock, crazy name for a guitar player, by the way. He taught me since I was 12 years old. So he's been teaching me for, almost 20 years now. But he was in a band called the Killjoys, and they had a couple hits in Canada. They're an alt rock band up here. They're a great band. But he told me when I was, just starting the band, he's just like, Luke, you got to get a tuner. I used to not do the same thing. I used to I thought it would be more natural to tune on stage. He's just like, don't do it. And anyways, Mike was right, but everybody has to learn their own lessons their own way. And so Mike, you were right. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you earlier, but now I'm there with the stage tuner. It's essential. Nobody wants to listen to you tune. Okay. It doesn't matter who you are. It's not 1972. Use a stage tuner, be an adult. That's coming from a place of experience. You're wasting our and your own time tuning by ear on stage.
Yes, and it's just easier. It's just easier to do.
Yeah. It's like, do you also use carrier pigeons instead of a cell phone? Like we've made improvements. Why not take advantage of them? They directly, apply to your trade and make it easier. And may I add, better for the audience, which I think it must be considered. I know everyone's up there doing their art and stuff, but I feel that when you get up there, at least the way I think about it is like all of my artistry and all of my kind of creativity, all that stuff, that gets kind of put to the side when we go out and pay or play for people that have paid to see us. As I am now wearing the entertainer's hat, and I am there to try and make everybody have as good a time as possible. And I just don't think that includes listening to me tuning. So it only took me 9 years to come to that realization. So yeah, that's my speech about stage tuners. Please use a stage tuner. But I have found that setting up a guitar properly and setting up a guitar properly for how you play can avoid almost ever having to use a tuner. And I play guitar extremely clumsily and aggressively and heavy-handedly, and I barely ever have to tune my Les Paul on stage. I've kind of just found a way of, or it's all about little certain things, right? Making sure that you have a very well cut nut, and making sure that you've properly stretched the strings and properly, strung them up, and that you're making sure that all the contact points, which is basically just the bridge and the nut, are really well lubricated. And I find that goes a really, really long way. Just taking the necessary steps and time to ensure that, I almost never have to use my tuner. So, but these things I've learned the hard way. I remember having a theory right before a big show, I'm going to stretch my strings before I go on this time and tune them all so that they're just so tight. And then you get up and everything's going sharp, and it's the worst feeling in the world when you're up there in front of a lot of people and your guitar is just not cooperating. But you learn. I feel I have a pretty good handle on it now, but it has taken me a long time to kind of get it to cooperate.
For me, one of the biggest things that changed the tuning stability game for me was going to a wound G. Once I did that, a lot of the problems that people associate with the G string just kind of went away, or at least were not nearly as frequent. Plus, I liked how it sounded and how it felt. It's small. It's a small gauge. It's just like a 20, so you can barely even notice that it's wound. In the old days, that used to be kind of hard. You'd get a wound G, and it might be a 22 or a 24, depending on who you got it from, and that doesn't feel great to me. That feels out of balance and wacky. And then it's just a bigger diameter than you're used to feeling. But once I was able to get a 20, it was like, oh, this pretty much feels like a plain string.
Yeah.
Performs like a wound string, which is really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's all about finding the things that are going to work for you. I mean, I've experimented with a ton of different gauges and stuff, and I just settled on the 11s basically. And we're half step down anyways, so definitely worked a lot better for me. And then I know there's a lot of very passionate opinions against doing it, but I find that doing the top wrap on the Les Paul works for me great. It's definitely positively affected the tuning stability for me, and I almost never break strings. I broke strings all of the time when I did the stock through the tailpiece over the bridge. Yeah. But doing the top wrap has really just been the way I've done it, and has definitely helped it stay in tune for me. But I really do think that the most important part of a guitar's tuning stability is the nut. And it's so easy to misdiagnose it as other issues. Oh, it's the tuning keys. Oh, the bridge is screwed up. Oh, these, but if you have a properly cut nut and you are keeping it really well lubricated, that's where majority of the problems that I've ever experienced are usually emanating from. So if you're ever having problems with your tuning stability, take it to the best luthier you can find and make sure your nut situation is A+, and everything else will come together. It's rarely the tuning pegs. My godfather, who gave me my first guitar, he's got a very impressive guitar collection himself, because he's been acquiring them since the 60s. When there was no such thing as vintage yet. And he got a brand new SG in 1966 from Long and McQuaid, and was having tuning problems. And they told him you got to change the tuners to Spurzell. These Grovers aren't good enough. And he did that, and still same problem. And what ultimately the problem was the nut. The nut is where the strings pass back and forth. And if it's not, slick as a whistle there, you're going to have problems. So there's my nut sermon to everybody. I'm sure you guys already know this, but these are the lessons that I've painfully learned myself. So if they're of any help, I'm happy.
It's one of those things that's easy to overlook, right? The string's in there.
Yeah.
It must be it must be fine,
Must
right?
be fine. Yeah.
It fits. It fits. It's all good. But yeah, if you especially Les Pauls famously have the G string issue, and what people don't realize is like if you tune it up and you've got it tuned, or so you think, and then it's actually just stuck in the nut, and then it slips.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, while you're playing, it slips. It's going to go completely out of tune on you. And why do I constantly have to retune? Probably because it's getting stuck in there.
Yeah.
And you're not actually in tune when you think you are, because the string isn't being held properly.
And the annoying thing about guitars, and particularly Gibson style guitars, is, in my experience at least, is that you kind of have to have them all in line, or as tuned as possible, because if something dramatically shifts on one, it's going to affect the other ones because it's going to change the tension. So it's to me, it's all just about like regular maintenance, just like making sure everything is lubricated, and honestly, making sure you're playing them. If you leave it in the case for a while or leave it on a rack for a while, it's going to be cranky. It's going to take some playing in to get everything kind of used to being used again. And, we've done records where I've been like, I'll bring out my Rick. It's been in the case for like 6 months, and I'll bring it out and try and use it on something. I'll string it up, and it's just like, this is not holding tune at all, and is extremely upset with me for its lack of attention in the last 6 months. So if you ever plan to use something, make sure you're, playing it into shape up to the thing that you have to use it for. That's another thing I'd say, but
it's kind of like a car in that regard, right? If you let a car just sit, it's generally not good.
No.
Things start freezing up, the bearings get stuck, like it starts developing corrosion in places that it wouldn't, because it's designed to move.
Yeah.
You have to at least roll that thing around the block once a month, or it's going to give you problems just from sitting there,
Yeah. Some squirrels are going to move in,
Yes, that's right. The guitars, it's a machine.
It is.
A lot of us don't think of it that way, but it's got a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things. That's why there are people that work on guitars for a living. There's things that need to all work together as a system in order for it to perform the way that we come to expect it to.
Yeah.
Occasionally you can get by with something and you can abuse it or kind of neglect it here and there, and it's okay. That happens with cars too sometimes. But in general, you've got to maintain them both, and you've got to use them both, or it's going to give you problems.
It's going to give you problems.
What it is.
100%. Yeah. And especially with especially with adjusting the neck, like if I want to be able to use something and rely on it, like I usually have to do a neck adjustment like a day or two at least before, when I actually want to use it, for the actual adjustment to fully settle.
Totally.
All these things that are super unsexy, but like you learn the hard way. Like I remember one time we played a show, we were playing in a stadium across Canada, opening for a band called Billy Talent. And the night before the biggest show, my friend was playing my Les Paul, and he tuned it up to standard because he was playing something after we had played, and I just put it back in the case. And the next day I pulled it out and I was like getting ready to play it. And the neck, like the neck bow had increased significantly just from being under a much higher tension overnight. And I was even more inept at guitar that night than I usually am. And it really taught me a lesson. Like you got to, you really have to keep them in good nick and keep an eye on them for them to function optimally. And that's why when we tour, I only bring a couple guitars with me, just the bare minimum, because I want to be able to put all of my attention and maintenance into one or two of them rather than a boat of them. So it's the Les Paul is pretty much the only guitar that I feel pretty comfortable with in terms of all the maintenance points and where the weak points are and the things to pay attention to. But to me, they're just extremely robust for playing live. And and they have stayed in tune. I had an SG Junior that I used for a while, but it was a newer reissue. To be honest with you, it wasn't the greatest guitar in the world, but I could not keep the damn thing in tune. The neck was so thin. It just requires a completely different mindset to maintain a guitar like that than it does with a Les Paul, or at least I found. That was also in the days before I used a stage tuner as well. So you can imagine what that sounded like. And when I was using an Ampeg V4, so it was extra loud. Yeah. So good stuff.
So like people could really hear you too.
Really hear that I was out of tune. Yeah. That I was struggling. But that's pretty much been it for me. I mean, it takes a lot to get me excited in terms of guitars that I want to buy at this point. Like I kind of have all of the guitars that I want. Like it's funny because I'll say to myself like, ooh, I could really see myself with that. That is a sick SG. But then I ask myself, would I use it instead of this guitar? And the answer is no. So, I mean, it's very hard to get excited about guitars, to be about new guitars, or like getting excited about buying another guitar. I haven't really bought another guitar in it's been 5 years since I bought a guitar, which is a long time for me because I went through a steady period of buying a guitar or selling a guitar or whatever, like, moving them around for like 10 years. And then I just haven't really changed at all. I have one acoustic guitar and 5 Les Pauls. And then I have some weird oddball electrics that I like to use when we're recording, like that Rickenbacker. And I have a Dan Armstrong that I like to use when we go on tour. I got a
just got a Dan Armstrong. I love
you got one? Yeah, they're sick, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. Like the full 2 octaves is a real treat if you're soloing like an idiot like I do.
Maybe you got something else going on. I got the Dan Armstrong, the Lucite guitar.
Yeah,
so actually, yeah. That's right. It is a full 2 octaves. I kind of forgot about that part because I'm just a chugga boy.
Yeah, fair.
You're right. I totally spaced that fact on it. I just wanted one, admittedly, because Greg from Black Flag played one.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's the guy that everybody wanted one because of.
I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I think ironically, I love the pickups that come with those.
Yeah.
I actually got three of them. But I think he just had like a super distortion taped in there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's all he used. Like we toured with Flag, and Steven Egerton from Descendants was playing guitar in the band, and he had an exact replica of Greg Ginn's rig, and then clearly studied Greg's playing so much that it sounded exactly like Greg Ginn. Like He had just the kill switch and the super distortion, and with like the power amps and the PA amp, like it sounded like in the best way, like one sound, no mercy. It was amazing. And he had the rig, and it was perfect. It was just a treat to see him play every night, and the rest of the band.
So cool. Well, hey man, we are nearing the end of the main episode of the podcast, and I have a couple classic questions I like to get into. But before I do that, I like to give the chance for the guests to take the floor, and you can thank your grandma. You can say whatever you want to say to a few thousand people right now. And now is the floor is yours, as I like to say.
Well, I would just like to say that I love rock and roll so much, and it's I'm extremely lucky to get to do this, and it's just great to talk about gear because no one lets me talk about gear around them because I'm so annoying about it. So I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast and talking about guitars and pedals and amps. And I look forward to the extended conversation. I'm sure we can get into some more even granular, nerdy stuff.
We'll get real weird. With it. I can guarantee you that. So yeah. And you're welcome back whenever, and you can hit me up and talk about gear whenever. It's totally fine. This is
my pleasure. Yeah.
All right, man. So, classic questions. First one. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
The HM2. No comparison.
Ooh, I think that might have been the first time the HM2's been.
I just got one, and it's like we're going to do a new record in like a week or two. And like, there's going to be some serious HM2 on there.
Yeah. The HM2 is a lot of fun. I didn't understand it when I first got it because everyone's like, you got to do the chainsaw, turn everything up. And I was like, I don't like that sound. Like, I don't like how that doesn't work for anything I do. So I started setting it more quote unquote normal, like how I would set something up. And I'm like, oh yeah, this actually is a really rad pedal. I don't like the chainsaw sound. Sorry, everybody. All the black metal purists are going to come out of the woodwork and try to kill me or something. But
with their, the corpse paint, you're going to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not too worried about it.
No, I don't think so either.
No. But yeah, HM2. I like that. That's the first.
My favorite setting on it is like volume dimed, obviously, and like distortion at 0, and then like the two EQs. So I guess the EQ is active, like it's a parametric boost, and so I kind of put those almost at full, or like maybe a little bit back, but usually at full. Like put distortion at 0. Like that's that with like my plexi sounds like the apocalypse. I love it.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, next question, and this is the one that gets a little bit dicey. This is where families tend to like break up. It's a serious question. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
I'm just a either regular cheese pizza or pepperoni kind of guy. You know, I've tried. I will eat pizza with anything on it. Maybe not like literally anything, but like anything that you could consider a conventional pizza topping. I love it all, but my girlfriend's vegetarian, so cheese pizza for me. Okay.
Do you have any specific local pizzerias you like, or regional styles that you gravitate toward, like New York or anything like that?
I'm a big fan of Buffalo style pizza. Do you know that?
I don't know. Tell me more.
So a friend of ours, so we obviously live close to Buffalo. It's about 45 minutes away. But our friend, who's like another gear lord, this guy owns like 4 Sun Model Ts and like all of this. He's a wild dude, but his name's Shane Tyrer, and he's applied his formidable brain towards making Buffalo style pizza, which I'd never had before. And, you know, I don't think that I can, impart to you all of the specific aspects of this that make it a Buffalo style pizza. But the ones that I can remember are, it's a certain type of sauce, and that there's fresh minced garlic that goes on like right at the end before they put it into the broiler. And I can't remember anything else, but anyways, Buffalo style pizza. He's got a pizza place called Boss Pizza in St. Catharines. Funny enough, Boss Pizza. And he does it like, it's like you kind of have to hit the drop. Like you got to put it in order, and he does it like once a week, and you got to go pick it up. But it's probably the best pizza I've ever had. So shout out to Boss Pizza in St. Catharines.
There's another thing I got to put on my list of pizza destinations. All right. Boss Pizza in St. Catharines. Well, dude, this was great. Thanks for coming on. This is the most for being a supposed guitar-based show. This is occasionally, well, actually very often veers off into completely non-guitar related categories. And we pretty much stuck with it this whole time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think that's refreshing for the listeners who thought they were turning into a guitar podcast. You did this time.
Well, we didn't quite solve the Kennedy assassination, but we did talk about guitars. So
we'll do that on Patreon.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
Sounds good.
All right. For Luke, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. If you would like to support this show directly, it goes right back into the show. It literally keeps the lights on in the shred shed. If you could go to patreon.com/tonemob, you can get even more of this conversation. It's just $5 a month. It's really not a lot on an individual basis, but when a bunch of people come together and do it, it really, really, really makes a massive difference. So thank you to everyone that's doing that. And if you can't, I totally get it. No sweat. But if you could do something for me that doesn't cost any money, that would be sharing this with a friend. Share this with somebody that you think would enjoy it. Spread it around the internet. Tell everybody that you think would care about this show, because honestly, that's the most important thing. If there weren't people listening, it would have definitely ended a long time ago. So if there's anyone you can think of, any forums you're a part of, anything, any way to amplify this signal, I would really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much to everyone that has done that. I can't tell you how much that means to me. All right, I'm going to sign off. I got some more interneting to do, and I will see you on the interwebs and be talking to you again very, very soon. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.